Hello, I hope you're doing well. Today I will be talking about the books that I read in September. First up, my Australian read for this month was Dirt-Music by Tim Winton. This was published in 2002 and is one of Winton's quite famous novels. It's set in a fictional Australian town called Whitehead, north of Perth in Western Australia, and is about two characters, Georgie Jutland, who is a 40-year-old woman who's kind of been running away from her very rich Western suburbs family for her whole life, and Lou Fox, who is part of the sort of notorious Fox family who were not well liked in the town, though he is the last Fox who remains alive. The book is kind of about their love story. It's kind of about prejudices in a small town. Mainly it seems to be about the landscape of northern Western Australia. There is a lot of descriptions of landscape, so through reading this book I kind of feel like I've gone on a tour of the area. There is a love story between these two characters. The interactions between Georgie and Lou were the most interesting parts of the book for me, and they surprisingly have very few for the fact that they're meant to be the romance of the story. I did enjoy the first half of the book, and I probably wouldn't have if it wasn't Tim Winton writing the story. There's something about his writing that gets me engaged with things that otherwise I would have absolutely no interest in. I guess it also helps that it's set in WA, and so I'm very familiar with the visuals of the landscape, and there are a few parts set in Perth, which is still exciting to me to read the word Perth in a novel. But I found the book went on way too long. It could have been half the length, I think, and had a lot more impact. And the descriptions of the landscape just became more and more frequent as the book went on, and I just got a bit bored by those descriptions eventually, because there's really only so much you want to hear about the rocks and the dirt and the ocean. I can definitely see why this was nominated for the Man Booker Prize and is a well-loved novel, but for me it just didn't have as much impact as I really wanted it to. Next, I read the book everyone's talking about, The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I'm one of those people that really didn't need this book to exist. I find The Handmaid's Tale perfectly complete on its own, so I felt like there was not really anything more I needed to know about Gilead. The TV show really proved that to me, because I found that TV show to be very tedious, very repetitive. But I love Margaret Atwood, and it's so rare that I buy a new book that I had to go to my local bookshop and get this on the day it was released. It cost me $42. I could have bought like 4 meals with that. Anyway, I went into it with an open mind and sadly feel like my point was proved that I didn't need to know anything more about Gilead. In fact, this book's probably worse than I was expecting, and yet I still enjoyed it. So it's from 3 different perspectives. One, a young girl who's brought up in Gilead. One, a young girl who's been brought up in Canada. And then a perspective from one of the aunts. And it's written as if they are writing sort of a confession or a testament, as the title would suggest. And from the beginning I had an inkling of who these characters might be. The identity of the aunts revealed pretty early. The other 2 characters you're left guessing a little bit longer, but it was so obvious who they are that I thought there must be another twist around the corner. Sadly there was not. I was exactly right, and I'm someone who's terrible at guessing twists. I guess I must sort of read and watch things in a very passive way. I'm not someone who likes to go around making up theories about the stories that I love. I very much just like to either read or watch the thing and find out what the writers have intended. So in that way I often get quite surprised at twists, because I'm not thinking about whether there's a twist at all. So the fact that I was able to pick up on every single twist in this book just goes to show that it's really not very well written. And that was the most surprising thing for me. I find that even if I don't enjoy the story, I still enjoy her actual writing. And it was enjoyable in a way. She has a very sardonic wit, and those parts are really funny, especially from Aunt Lydia's perspective. But aside from that, I just found the ideas were so repetitive, the plotting so melodramatic. It was incredibly sentimental as well, which I found quite surprising, because I find her books generally very unsentimental, and that's probably why I like them so much. But yeah, I did end up enjoying it, especially towards the end when the characters all met each other and all became involved in this escape plot, and it was kind of fun to read about. It's definitely not something I'll be returning to in the same way that I'll be returning to The Handmaid's Tale, and it makes me kind of sad that even if Margaret Atwood went into writing this with the best intentions of adding to the story and updating the story as well, I just think she didn't succeed at all. Also, to add on to that, I didn't like that there are aspects from the TV show included in this book that kind of annoyed me. I really wanted the TV show to be a totally separate entity. So if you're not interested in The Handmaid's Tale, I would not worry about the hype. If you are, prepare to be potentially disappointed, or you may love this. I feel like opinions are going to be quite divided. Lastly, I read another new release, my second new release for this year. That is The Nichol Boys by Colson Whitehead. The Underground Railroad was one of my favourite books books from the last few years. And so when I saw my library was ordering this one in, I jumped onto the request queue. This is about a boy called Elwood Curtis living in Florida in the 1960s, and something happens, entirely not his fault, where he gets sent to Nichol Academy, an institute for boys that is an alternative to prison, but of course is its own form of prison, and the boys there endure the most horrific acts of violence and cruelty. I think Colson Whitehead is a fascinating writer. I'm really curious to read some of his back catalogue. He just is so skillful that you know, regardless of the content of what he's writing about, you are in the hands of an incredibly skilled writer. And I think it's his skill at writing that makes what you're reading digestible, but at the same time really highlights the cruelty. It's the same way in a film where if you don't show violence on screen, it has a lot more impact because our imaginations work to be much more horrific than anything that could actually be portrayed on screen. And I think it's the same with this novel. He describes some of the cruelty, he doesn't describe all of it, not in great detail, and in that way it has more of an impact. It's also based on a real place that existed in America. You know that everything that happens in this book has happened somewhere in America at some point and is still happening right now. Talking about not guessing twists, there is a twist almost right at the end of this novel that really made me draw a sharp intake of breath. I'm sure the twist was probably quite obvious to most people, but because I don't really pay attention to those kinds of things, it really shocked me and just made the book more impactful. So that's all I read in September. Let me know if you've read any of those books, especially if you've read the Testaments, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!